A stormy night. A millionaire husband believes he can get rid of his pregnant wife by pushing her off a cliff into a raging sea. He is convinced no one will ever know the truth. But what he doesn't realize is that fate has other plans, because the woman he tried to erase will not only survive, she will also return stronger, with the power to destroy his empire, piece by piece. What follows is a story of betrayal, survival, and justice served colder than the ocean itself. And believe me, you won't believe how it ends until we discover it together. Tell us what time you're listening and where you're joining us from. Leave us a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The wind howled like a beast on the cliff, carrying the salty taste of the sea into the night. Waves crashed below, each one rising and falling, as if to devour everything that dared to fall into its mouth. The moonlight painted the jagged rocks silver, their sharp edges gleaming like knives in the darkness. And there, standing precariously close to the edge, was a young woman clutching her swollen belly with trembling hands. Her eyes shone with tears, wide with disbelief at the man in front of her. It was her husband, Julian, a millionaire, the man she once believed would protect her forever. His suit flapped in the wind, his expression frozen in a cold fury. There was no warmth in his gaze, no trace of love, only contempt mixed with something darker, something she couldn't quite name. "Please," she whispered, her voice almost stolen by the ocean's roar. "Please, think about the baby. Think about our child." But he didn't move. He didn't blink. His jaw tightened, and his lips curled into a smile as sharp as a knife's edge. "You were never part of the plan," he said coldly. His voice was as sharp as the rocks below and cut through the air. The woman, Amelia, shook her head in disbelief. Her knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stand tall, one hand still protecting her stomach. "We were supposed to be a family," she cried. "You promised me." His hand raised, not in comfort, but in a shove. For an instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. The gulls stopped screaming. The waves froze mid-crash. Even the wind stilled, as if the universe itself was waiting to see what this man would do. And then it happened. His palm pressed against her shoulder with brutal force. Her scream pierced the night as her body stumbled backward. The ground crumbled under her heels, and she reached out, her fingers desperately clawing at the air, searching for something, anything to hold on to. But there was nothing. The last thing she saw was the face of the man she once trusted with her life, watching her with cold satisfaction. And then she fell. The gust of wind deafened her ears. Her heart hammered in her chest. Her stomach ached, as if the baby inside her knew the danger. The rocks scraped her arms as she tumbled, her body spinning out of control toward the dark water below. Her voice broke in the night. "God, help me." For a second, it felt like the end. The cliff disappeared from her sight, replaced by the merciless sea. Her body struck a rock, the pain exploding in her side. Blood stained her dress. She tried to scream again, but the ocean swallowed her sound. Above, her millionaire husband turned and walked away. He didn't look down. He didn't care. His shoes crunched on the gravel as he left, his shadow swallowed by the darkness. The waves rose to claim her. The salty water burned her throat as she gasped for air. The cold was unbearable, numbing her limbs. Her hands beat weakly against the current, but exhaustion dragged her deeper. Her thoughts blurred. However, among the pain, something remained clear. She would not give up. Not now. Not with her child's heart still beating inside her. The camera of fate lingered on her face as her body disappeared into the stormy sea, and the screen went black. A narrator's voice whispered a single line, but this was not the end. Not for her. not for the life she carried within, and not for the empire her husband thought he had won. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting a golden warmth onto the marble floor. The air inside the mansion felt still, almost too still, as if every detail had been arranged to look perfect from the outside. The aroma of fresh flowers filled the room, and soft music played from hidden speakers. At first glance, it seemed like a dream, the kind of life most people would envy. She remembered walking through that same room months before, her hands resting gently on her still small but growing belly. Her husband smiled then, kissed her forehead, and told her everything was under control. He promised her the world, and she believed him. She wanted to believe, because the man she married was supposed to be her safe place. He had money. He had influence. He had the ability to make problems disappear with a single phone call. And when he looked at her with that confident smile, she thought she saw love. But even in those so-called happy days, small cracks were already beginning to appear. She remembered the first time he asked her to quit her job. He presented it as love, as care. "You don't need the stress of long hours," he told her. "You should be at home, resting, thinking about our future as a family." His voice was gentle, but his eyes didn't ask. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. She sold her business. She closed her office door for the last time, convincing herself it was the right thing to do for her marriage. She gave up her independence, and for a while, she smiled through the sacrifice. There were candlelit dinners on the balcony, wine glasses raised in toasts, and whispered promises that made her heart believe. He took her on a trip to the Mediterranean, where yachts glided over turquoise waters. He put his arm around her waist and told strangers how lucky he was to have her. The world saw a perfect couple. She saw a man who seemed untouchable, but in silent moments, when the laughter faded, she sometimes noticed something more. A tone in his voice when she disagreed, a flash of irritation in his eyes when she gave her opinion. He corrected the way she dressed. He decided which friends she should keep. He chose her schedule without asking. Every small act came wrapped in the language of care, but it carried the weight of control. Still, she tried to bury her doubts. She told herself it was normal. She told herself that every marriage required compromise. She wanted to believe in the fairy tale. She remembered decorating the baby's room together. He painted the walls, or at least pretended to for his friends' cameras. He joked about choosing names, though he rejected every suggestion she made. She laughed, ignoring the pang in her chest. There was one night that was seared into her memory. They were sitting under crystal chandeliers at a charity gala, her hand resting on the curve of her stomach and his arm draped over her shoulders. The lights shone, the crowd applauded, and for a moment she thought, maybe this is enough. Maybe this is what love is. But deep down, a silent voice whispered, a warning she rejected. Because when he leaned in that night, promising her forever, she so desperately wanted to believe him. She silenced every doubt, silenced her instincts. She let his words fill her like wine, sweet and intoxicating. Now, looking back, she saw the truth. The warmth was a mask. The promises were chains. The love she thought she had was nothing more than an act for the world, and that act was about to come crashing down. The house was silent that night, too silent for a place that normally buzzed with staff and constant activity. She was in the library, one hand resting on the curve of her stomach, when she heard it. A voice, low and sharp, filtering through the slightly ajar door of her husband's study. She stood still. Her heart pounded against her ribs, pushing her forward. Step by step, she crept closer, careful not to let the floorboards creak. The glow from his desk lamp spilled into the hallway, and with it came the sound of his laughter. It wasn't the laughter he saved for public events. It wasn't the polished charm that won over investors. This laughter was different. It was cruel. She leaned against the wall, her breath caught in her throat, and listened. "You have nothing to worry about," he said, his voice soft and confident. "Once she's gone, everything will be ours. The estate, the accounts, the whole fortune. She won't be in the way for much longer." Her blood ran cold. Her husband wasn't alone. Another voice, soft and feminine, answered on the other end of the phone. She couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the laughter, the satisfaction. The mistress. Tears filled her eyes. Her body trembled. She squeezed her stomach tighter, as if to protect her child from the poison of those words. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her fingers shook as she pressed the record button. The screen glowed dimly, capturing every syllable. "You'll have everything you've ever dreamed of," he continued, a tone of promise in his voice. "The moment she disappears, we'll be free. Free to live without her constant complaints, without her pathetic tears. She's nothing. She's never been anything." She almost dropped the phone. Her vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to hold it steady. She needed proof. She needed evidence of the betrayal that was now exposed. He paused and then added words that made her knees buckle. "Don't worry, no one will ever question it. When she falls, it will look like an accident." The breath caught in her throat. She covered her mouth with her hand to stifle the scream that almost escaped. Every word was recorded in her heart like a knife. Her world spun. She stumbled backward down the hallway, careful not to make a sound. Once in the safety of her room, she collapsed into a chair by the window. She clutched the phone to her chest, the recording still glowing. Her whole body shook as sobs racked her. How had it come to this? The man she once thought was her protector was planning her destruction. The father of her unborn child was whispering death in the night. She looked down at her belly, whispering between sobs. "I'll keep you safe. No matter what, I'll keep you safe." Her mind raced. She thought about calling someone, anyone, but who would believe her? He was powerful. He controlled the narrative. He always did. But now she had something he couldn't control. His own voice, his own confession. She wiped her face with trembling hands and pressed stop on the recording. She played it back, listening again to the chilling words. Every second proved the truth. He wanted her to disappear. He wanted to erase her from existence. And yet, sitting there in the quiet of her room, she felt something shift inside her. The tears slowed. The trembling began to calm. The fear was still there, yes, but next to it, something stronger was growing. Resolve. She whispered to herself one more time. "He thinks I'm weak. He thinks I'll vanish. But he doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I'll do to protect my child." The night outside stretched long and heavy. The waves crashed against the cliff below the estate. And although she didn't know it yet, those recorded words would become the weapon that would shatter his empire. The night sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that swallow the moon and turn the world into a stage of shadows. The wind cut across the cliff like a warning, but the warning was not heard. He had chosen this place, far from neighbors, far from questions, and far from anyone who could stop him. She was a few steps from the edge, her dress whipped by the wind, her hands pressed tightly against her stomach. Her heart was beating so fast it drowned out the roar of the waves. She knew what was coming. She had heard it in his voice that night on the phone. She had replayed his words over and over. "When she falls, it will look like an accident." Now she was there, trembling, looking at the man who had once promised her forever. "Please," she pleaded, her voice raw with fear. "You don't have to do this. We can walk away. I won't fight you for the money. I won't ruin your reputation. Just let me live. Let our son live." His eyes narrowed, reflecting none of the love she once thought she saw. His jaw tightened, and his voice cut like a blade. "Do you really think I built all of this to share it with you? You're nothing but a burden. You were useful once. Now you're in the way." Amelia, tears streaming down her face, warm against the bite of the cold air, shook her head. She took a step back, her heel slipping on the loose gravel, but she managed to stay firm. "You're wrong," she said, her voice broken. "I'm not nothing. I'm his mother, and this baby deserves a chance." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, maybe doubt, maybe hesitation, but it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. He moved forward, his presence enveloping her like a shadow. The smell of his cologne mixed with the wind, strong and suffocating. "Enough," he hissed. His hand shot out, grabbing her arm with a painful strength. She screamed, the sound lost in the waves. He dragged her closer to the edge, his face inches from hers. "This is the end," he whispered, with a bitter breath. "No one will ever know the truth. They'll believe you slipped. They'll mourn for a while, then they'll forget, and I'll finally be free." She fought, her body twisting against his grip, but his strength overpowered hers. She clawed at his sleeve, pleading with her eyes, but he only tightened his grip. Then it happened. With a violent shove, he threw her away. Time seemed to stop. Her feet left the ground, her body tilted backward, her hands reaching into the empty air. Her scream cut through the night, a raw sound that echoed against the rocks. The last thing she saw was his silhouette standing over her, looking down with cold indifference. Her body hit the side of the cliff, rolling, crashing, tearing against the sharp stone. Pain shot through her like fire. She gasped for air as blood soaked her dress. Her hands never left her belly, even as she fell toward the water. Finally, she hit the ocean. The icy embrace of the sea enveloped her, dragging her into the darkness. The salt water burned her lungs as she struggled to breathe. The current dragged her, spinning her in its merciless embrace. Above, on the cliff, he stood still for a moment, listening to the waves consume her. He shook his hands, as if cleaning the last trace of her existence. Without looking back, he turned and walked away, his figure swallowed by the night. The roar of his car engine echoed in the distance, fading into silence. And there, under the black water, she fought with everything she had left. Her body was broken, her strength was fading, but her will was fierce. She pressed her hand over her stomach and whispered into the void, "I will not let this be our end." The ocean was relentless. Each wave hit her body with the force of a hammer, dragging her deeper into the icy abyss. The salt water filled her mouth and burned her throat. She coughed violently, desperate for air, as she thrashed her arms, trying to stay afloat. The icy current felt like knives cutting her skin, numbing her muscles until every movement became heavier, slower. Her dress clung to her like chains, soaked, pulling her down. She kicked hard, fighting to get to the surface, but the sea seemed determined to claim her. Her vision blurred as the water irritated her eyes. The cliffs above were nothing more than jagged shadows, too far away to reach. She pressed a hand against her stomach, whispering to the storm, "Stay with me, my baby. Please, stay with me." The sound of her own voice gave her something to hold on to, a fragile thread of hope in a sea that wanted to erase her. Pain throbbed in her side where the rocks had torn her flesh. Warm blood mixed with the salt water, leaving a trail that the waves erased immediately. Her chest burned, her lungs screamed, but she forced herself to fight. She couldn't give up. Not now. With every last drop of strength she had, she pushed her arms through the water, lifting her head just enough to take a breath before another wave fell on her. She spat and coughed, choking as the sea devoured her cries. Still, She kept moving. One stroke, one breath, one more chance to live. In the distance, between the rain and the foam, she saw a faint light flicker. At first, she thought it was her imagination. Her mind was unraveling under the weight of exhaustion. But it appeared again, a beam of light sweeping the waves, cutting through the darkness. Her heart leaped. Someone was there. Someone was looking for her. She tried to scream, but her voice was nothing more than a broken gasp. She lifted her arm weakly out of the water, sending ripples across the surface. Her body begged her to stop, to give up, to let the sea take her. But she couldn't, not with her child's heart still beating inside her. Another wave fell over her head. She sank beneath the surface, the darkness enveloping her. The cold was unbearable, pulling at her, whispering for her to give in. Her lungs burned as she held her breath. Images flashed through her mind. Her child's small hands, the room she had painted, the promises she once believed in. And then, a new thought. A fire that broke the ice. Her husband's voice, cold and ruthless, saying she was nothing, that she was a burden, that her death would look like an accident. Rage exploded inside her, joining her determination. She would not allow his words to become truth. With one last surge of strength, she kicked upward, fighting her way until her face emerged again. She gasped, coughing violently, but her eyes locked on the approaching light. It stopped, sweeping the waves until it focused directly on her. Shouts cut through the storm, faint but unmistakable. There was a boat nearby. Her body trembled with relief, but she didn't stop fighting. She kept her head out of the water, raising her arm again and again, whispering to her child, "We're going to make it. Hang on, just a little longer." The light grew brighter. The sound of an engine cut through the roar of the sea. For the first time since she fell from the cliff, hope broke through the darkness. She was not alone. The boat cut through the storm like a blade. Its spotlight illuminated the waves until it settled on her battered body. She squinted against the blinding light, her arms still moving weakly. Voices on deck grew louder, more urgent, carried by the wind. "There! She's there!" The sound filled her with relief. She was no longer invisible. Someone had seen her. Someone was coming. Two men in thick jackets leaned over the side, ropes in hand. One shouted, "Hold on, we're stopping!" But her arms felt like stone, her legs numb, her chest burning with every breath. She tried to raise her hand, but it sank back into the water. Then another figure appeared at the edge of the boat. Taller, more robust. His presence was commanding, even in the midst of the chaos. The spotlight illuminated his face, revealing silver hair combed back by the rain and a pair of firm eyes, filled with determination. He was no ordinary rescuer. He radiated authority, the kind of a man with years of power and survival. "Get her up," he ordered in a firm, serene voice. "Don't let her go." The men obeyed immediately, throwing a rope with a life buoy. The buoy hit the water a few inches from her hand. She gathered her last strength, extending her trembling fingers until she grabbed it. The rope tensed, and she felt herself being dragged toward the boat, inch by inch, wave after wave. Her head sank once, twice, but each time the rope held her up. At last, strong arms held her under the shoulders, lifting her from the icy sea. She collapsed onto the deck, coughing violently as salt water drained from her lungs. The man with the silver hair knelt beside her, placing a heavy blanket over her trembling body. His voice softened, no longer a leader's command, but the calm of someone who cares. "You're safe now. I have you." She looked at him through blurry vision. The details of his face cleared, the lines of a life marked by power, the serene confidence in his eyes. She had seen him before, in headlines, in newspaper and magazine photos. A billionaire, a man whose empire spanned continents. Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice broken. "Because fate put me here tonight," he replied simply. "And because no one deserves to be abandoned like that." Her tears mixed with the rain as she clung to the blanket. For the first time since she was pushed from the cliff, she felt warmth, not from the weather, but from the presence of someone who would not let her disappear. The boat roared back toward the coast, cutting through the waves. The crew worked quickly, bandaging her cuts, checking her pulse, placing warm compresses against her icy skin. But it was his presence that kept her steady, his serene voice guiding her back from the brink of despair. "Breathe slowly," he told her. "You are stronger than you think. You survived what was meant to destroy you. And this is just the beginning." She pressed her hand against her belly and whispered to her unborn child, "We are safe. Do you hear? We are safe, toi." The billionaire, Mr. Sterling, seemed to understand the silent promise she had just made. His gaze was firm, protective, unwavering. "Rest now," he said. "You'll need your strength for what's to come." The storm continued to rage around them, but inside that boat, a new story had begun. The storm had passed, leaving behind a gray and tranquil morning. Inside the billionaire's private estate, the air smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. The woman was wrapped in a thick robe, her hair still damp from the night before, her body sore, but alive. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, painting the room in a soft gold. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, she was safe. Across the large oak table sat the man who had saved her. His presence filled the room effortlessly. He spoke little, but his eyes carried the weight of decisions that had shaped empires. His staff moved silently in the background, bringing medical supplies, hot food, and stacks of documents. Everything in that place whispered power and preparation. "You survived something designed to end you," he said at last, in a serene but deliberate tone. "Now you must decide what comes next." Her fingers tightened around the teacup he had given her. The warmth seeped into her hands, giving her firmness. She looked down at her belly, feeling the faint kick of the life growing inside her. She had no other option but to move forward, not just for herself, but for her son. "I can't run," she said softly, her throat still rough. "If I disappear, he wins. He'll control the story. Everyone will believe his lies." The billionaire leaned back, watching her with a look of approval. "Then we will build the truth, brick by brick, step by step, until his empire crumbles under its own weight." He gestured, and an assistant spread files across the table. Photos of bruises, bank statements, property deeds. And in the center, her phone, the recording she had risked everything to get. She pressed play, and the room filled with the chilling sound of her husband's voice. "When she falls, it will look like an accident." She shuddered, covering her mouth as the words repeated. Listening to them again was like opening a wound, but she forced herself to hear them. It was no longer just pain. It was evidence. The billionaire paused the recording. "This alone is enough to start, but we won't stop here. We will gather every piece of evidence, every witness, every crack in his carefully polished life. He believes you no longer exist. That's our advantage." She nodded, resolve hardening with every word. "He can't know I survived. Not yet. I need time. We need to be ready." "Exactly," he replied. "While he celebrates his freedom, we will prepare your return. When the time comes, you will not only surprise him, you will destroy him. For hours they worked side by side. The Billionaire's team traced financial movements, uncovering hidden accounts and suspicious transfers. Lawyers drafted preliminary motions. Security experts analyzed the threats she might face. Every detail was laid out on the table like pieces of a puzzle, and little by little, the picture became clear. She also contributed, recalling moments she had buried, the times he forced her to sign documents she barely understood, the conversations she overheard at night, the mistress's name whispered in passing. Every memory was transformed into another weapon for her growing arsenal. As the sun set again, she felt different. Fear was still there, yes, but alongside it was something stronger. Determination. She placed her hand gently on her belly and whispered to her child, "He thinks we're gone, but we are still here, and we are going to take everything back." The billionaire looked at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Good," he said, "because the fight has just begun." The room fell silent, charged with the weight of what was to come. The plans were laid out, the evidence was secured, and the first step of her return had begun. The courthouse was packed with anticipation. Reporters crowded the marble steps with flashing cameras and voices rising on the morning air. Inside, the gallery was bursting, every seat taken, every aisle filled with murmurs. The millionaire husband, Julian, stood tall at the front, dressed in a flawless suit, his face carefully composed. To the world, he was still the image of success, a grieving widower ready to move on. He adjusted his tie and looked around with satisfaction. There was no trace of fear in his expression. Why would there be? His wife was dead. The sea had claimed her, and no one could prove otherwise. The judge called for order. Lawyers rustled papers. The mistress sat at the back, her eyes moving nervously, as if she knew the spotlight could land on her at any moment. Still, she forced a confident smile, resting her well-manicured hand on her designer purse. Then the doors at the back of the room opened. At first, no one turned. The murmuring continued, people glancing at notes and adjusting microphones. But then the echo of high heels resonated on the marble, firm and deliberate. The sound grew, demanding attention with every step. Slowly, heads began to turn. Conversations died mid-sentence. And there she was, the woman who was supposed to be dead. She walked into the courtroom with her head held high, her posture strong, despite the bruises still visible on her arms. Her hair was neatly tied back, her face serene but firm. The simple dark dress she wore made her presence even more striking. One hand rested protectively on her stomach, a silent reminder that she had not come alone. The room erupted. Gasps were heard. Reporters raised their cameras higher, capturing every angle. The mistress dropped her purse, her mouth open in shock. The judge banged his gavel, demanding silence, but it was impossible. The energy was electric. The millionaire's jaw went slack. His eyes widened, and for the first time in his carefully constructed life, he looked terrified. He stumbled backward, as if the sight of her was a ghost come to drag him into the abyss. She stopped in the center of the aisle, letting the moment hang. The cameras fired non-stop. Every flash of light recorded his fall deeper into history. "I'm alive," she said, her voice firm and clear. The words resonated throughout the room, silencing even the most stubborn whispers. "And I'm here to tell the truth." Her lawyer stepped forward, holding a thick folder of evidence. The billionaire ally sat in silence at the back, his face impassive, but his eyes gleaming with approval. This was her fight now, and she had taken it with both hands. The judge motioned for her to approach, and she did so with grace, each step echoing like a hammer sealing her husband's coffin. She reached the front, placing her phone on the desk. With a serene touch of her finger, the recording began to play. When she falls, it will look like an accident. The courtroom froze. His voice, unmistakable, filled every corner of the room. The gasps returned, louder this time, mixed with murmurs of disbelief and indignation. The millionaire's face lost all color. He shook his head violently, muttering, "No, this is manipulated. It's fake." But no one believed him. The woman looked him straight in the eyes. Her voice was low, but her words weighed like justice. "You tried to erase me, but you failed." The courtroom roared with noise. Reporters shouted questions. The mistress covered her face with trembling hands, and the millionaire was paralyzed, trapped in the nightmare he himself had created. Her reappearance had not only exposed the truth, it had shattered the empire he thought was eternal. The courtroom was a cauldron of chaos, but the judge's gavel finally brought silence. The words of the recording still hung heavy in the air. They were undeniable. They were damning. All eyes were fixed on the man who once dominated rooms with arrogance and charm. Now his face was pale, his forehead covered in sweat. He shifted in his seat, pulling at his tie as if it had suddenly become a noose. His lawyer leaned in, whispering desperately, but he pushed him away, his hands trembling. He tried to stand, but the weight of the evidence crushed him more with each second. "It's not what it looks like," he blurted out, his voice broken. "It's all a misunderstanding. She wants to ruin me. I loved her, but the gallery erupted in jeers and laughter. No one believed him anymore." Her lawyer stood up calmly, holding the phone high for everyone to see. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a premeditated attempt at murder," he said, in his own words, recorded by his wife, before he tried to kill her and her unborn child. The room gasped again, louder this time. The mistress covered her face with her hands, her perfect facade crumbling. She had been part of the whispers, part of the lies, and now her name would be forever tied to the scandal. The woman who had been presumed dead stood tall. She did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word she spoke weighed more than any shout. "I trusted him with my life. I trusted him with the future of our child, and he tried to take both from me because he thought I was weak. But I am still here. I am stronger than ever, and I will not be silent again." Her eyes locked on him, and he faltered. His lips moved, but no sound came out. For the first time, the man who had built an empire with intimidation and manipulation was powerless. The judge's tone was sharp. "Mr. Lancaster, this court has heard enough. Your actions are under investigation. You will be held in custody until trial." Two uniformed officers advanced. The millionaire tried to protest, his voice rising in desperation. "You can't do this to me. I am respected. I am powerful. You will all regret this." But his words sounded hollow, stripped of the authority they once held. The officers took him by the arms, dragging him toward the back of the room. He resisted, twisting violently, but his strength did not free him. The crowd rose from their seats, phones held high, capturing the image of a man once untouchable being led away in disgrace. The mistress cried out behind him, her voice shrill. "What about me? What about me?" But no one answered her. The cameras turned away. She was just another shadow in his fall. The woman sat down slowly, her hand on her belly, breathing calmly. Around her, people murmured words of support. Reporters threw questions, but none were aimed at him anymore. She had become the center of the story. The billionaire ally remained in silence in the gallery, watching with serene pride. He didn't need to speak. His mere presence was enough, reminding her that she now had powerful support and that she was no longer alone. When the room calmed down, she whispered to herself, barely audible, "He thought I would disappear, but he is the one who has lost everything." And in that moment, the power had truly shifted. The man who once reigned through fear now faced his own judgment. His empire was crumbling, piece by piece, while the woman he tried to erase remained intact. The following days advanced like waves, firm and relentless. News of the trial spread across all screens, headlines, and social media. The millionaire, once glorified, was now labeled a criminal, his face under bold letters that read betrayal and attempted murder. The empire he built with arrogance began to crumble, with broken deals, partners walking away, and investors demanding distance. For her, life took on a new rhythm. She no longer hid in the shadows. She no longer had to whisper her truth in secret. Now she was in the light, and the world was listening. The baby's room, once a symbol of broken promises, was redone with her own hands. Soft curtains swayed in the window, the painted walls shone in delicate shades, and every detail reflected her decisions. She placed a crib by the window, running her hand over the wooden frame. For the first time, she felt control. That space was hers. The billionaire who had saved her remained a firm presence. He never asked for gratitude or sought recognition. Instead, he became an anchor, guiding her with wisdom when the weight of everything threatened to crush her. One night, while they were on the balcony looking at the sea that had almost claimed her, he said in a low voice, "You survived what was meant to destroy you. That makes you more powerful than he ever was." She felt the breeze carrying her hair across her face. "I survived, and I'll make sure my son grows up knowing strength, not fear." The trial ended with a sentence that thundered like thunder. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The millionaire's arrogance had been broken long before the verdict, but the final blow was undeniable. He left the courtroom in shackles, his head bowed, his once proud figure broken. There were no more cameras for him. There was no more applause outside, only silence, heavy and final. She did not attend the sentencing. She didn't need to. Justice had been served, and she didn't have to give him another part of her presence. Instead, she spent that morning by the sea, her hand on her stomach, whispering to her child, "You are safe now. We are safe." Weeks later, her baby was born. The labor was long, but when the cries filled the room, it was like a new dawn. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she held that small body against her chest. The weight, the warmth, the miracle of it all filled her with a peace she hadn't felt in months. She looked at her son and whispered, "You are my reason. You are my beginning." Photographs of her leaving the hospital with her newborn spread quickly, but this time the headlines told a different story. They spoke of survival, of courage, of justice served. She was no longer defined by what had been done to her. She was defined by what she had overcome. Months later, she took to a stage at a charity event, her baby in her arms, addressing a crowd that hung on her every word. She spoke of strength, of resilience, of the importance of believing in survivors. Her voice rose with serene conviction. We can't choose the storms life gives us, but we can choose what to do when they come. I chose to fight. I chose to live. And I am here not as a victim, but as a survivor, as a mother, as someone who will never be silenced again. The applause that followed was long and thunderous. That night, as the city lights twinkled in the distance, she sat rocking her baby to sleep. The soft murmur of the night enveloped her like a blanket. She closed her eyes, letting peace sink into her. She had lost so much, but she had gained more. Her husband's power ended in chains. Hers had just begun.